Someone help me. Anyone?
Hi, I'm Zealous Zap. I occasionally have some intense boomer shooter phases, and during one such phase I picked up the entire Serious Sam franchise for pretty cheap. Except for Serious Sam 4 because it wasn't out yet, and a few of the spin-offs because, I don't know, they just weren't in the collection. All of the mainline Serious Sam entries are single-player FPS games characterized by gunning down hordes of ridiculous and increasingly big enemies, with your main defense mechanism being running backwards. However, for you, the viewer, the first Serious Sam enemy actually isn't in any of the games at all, because it's figuring out where the fuck you're supposed to start. The first entry in the series is Serious Sam the First Encounter, logically followed by the second encounter. However, there's many different releases of them on Steam. The original versions from the early 2000s go under the Serious Sam Classic prefix, but then there's Serious Sam Revolution, which combines the two. Years later, there was the Serious Sam HD versions of the games, which as the name implies, aims to be a slightly modernized re-release. And finally, we have 2017's Serious Sam Fusion, which aims to be a soft remaster of the HD version. So, yeah, a remaster of a remaster. It also aims to be similar to Revolution, in the sense that it combines both encounters. It includes Serious Sam 3 as well, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So to summarize, I consider Serious Sam Fusion to be the best way to experience the first and second encounters, and by extension, the best entry point into the series. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the gameplay. Let's go! Initially released in 2001 by the at the time small company Crow Team, TFE is if nothing else a respectable starting point. This is where we first step into the sneakers of Sam Stone, our protagonist and a man who will survive anything thrown at him because he's serious. The story is there, but like most games in this subgenre, it's more of a simple excuse for the cool stuff on your screen. The gist of it is that Sam is kind of an inverse Terminator. He was sent back in time to stop a future invasion from an alien race called Mental. He does so by collecting artifacts and, of course, shooting things. As for Sam's personality, he's your average one-liner spitting badass with a large array of weapons that you'd expect in something like this.
Oh, yourself! Uh-oh.
Said weapons are decently satisfying to use and the enemies all stand out from each other, which makes for some pretty solid gameplay, though the big green guys who throw homing orbs at you have officially joined my fuck you category of video game enemies. It's also worth being on the lookout for secrets too, because the first encounter has a lot of them. If you see somewhere that could have a secret, then there most likely is one. With that said, this game, like pretty much every other entry in the series, is still best experienced in short bursts. If you do try to binge it, you'll most likely start to fall asleep after around 4 levels. The environments, despite being well suited to the gameplay, start to feel a bit samey after a while, as most are some version of a flat expanse of sand with the occasional pyramid arena. Don't let that put you off though, because even in 2025 I think the first encounter is pretty fun. Definitely worth playing if you're big on single player FPS games, or even if you're just looking for something that's easy to pick up and play. Released in 2002, the second encounter is really just more of the first encounter, and as such, my opinion of it is practically the same. Though one thing I appreciate about the second encounter is that there's more variation in the environments.
Is it just me? Or did everything around here get a lot better looking?
It helps to alleviate the burnout that TFE had me feeling. There's a lot less of an ancient Egyptian theme, now with a more of a foresty and Aztec sort of look, at least until it isn't.
Good morning, Babylon!
The second encounter is actually made up of a Doom-like collection of episodes, and there's some crazy range between them. After the Aztec and Babylon levels, you're sent to Halloween and Christmas, before finally finishing at a medieval castle, where Sam uses its medieval cathedral rocket to fly into space. There is also some DLC episodes, but they suck. For some reason, the level designers thought it would be a good idea to throw full hordes of enemies at you while you barely have anything to fight them with, making for some pretty tedious levels. But going back to the main game, there's a few new weapons and enemies as well, which all fit into the gameplay seamlessly, alongside power-ups which give some added spice. Pretty much just building upon what was there already, as any good continuation should. Though my one exception for the enemies is probably the cannons, because I had to die to them a few times before realizing that they aren't just stage hazards and are actual living enemies that I have to shoot. But overall, the second encounter is pretty solid, definitely worth playing if you like the first encounter. Serious Sam 2 is a fucking weird game. Released in 2005, Sam 2 had a much bigger budget behind it, and it shows, partially because the game actually tells you itself.
This Let's just say that it has something to do with having a bigger game budget.
For one thing, the art style experienced a dramatic change, now looking a bit more like Jack 2, and parts of the soundtrack feel like they were lifted right out of Tom and Jerry. With that said, every core aspect of the Encounters gameplay is carried over, with a lot of small new things thrown into the mix, such as vehicles and turrets, gimmicky as they may be. But before you actually hop into a level, there's some additional setup I highly recommend. When you start a new game, you'll soon see this selection of options. Among them are rocket jumping, sprinting, and combo weapons. Enable these. Why these settings weren't on by default is beyond me, but having played through Serious Sam 2 both with and without them, I'm confident in saying that they give the gameplay a huge upgrade. Combo weapons lets you dual wield any weapons in the game and fire them independently.
Go, my pretties!
While rocket jumping and sprinting should be pretty self-explanatory. All of it helps with the slightly awkward flow of the base game, transforming it from a weirder Serious Sam entry, one of them at least, to a high-octane game that has a lot more staying power. Also adding to the chaos is grenades, which if you have enough distance can act as a get-out-of-jail-free card when you're low on ammo. There's a smidgen more of a story presence in 2 as well, with the game even having cutscenes, but they're a little rough.
Eddie, do something? I can't understand a bloody word they're saying.
Though some of the jokes still had me cracking smiles. The progression of the game now centers around 5 different worlds, each with a big bad boss at the end that guards a piece of the 5-piece plot device. Sam has to collect all 5 pieces to defeat Mental. Again, the worlds all make for fun shooting galleries that stand out from each other, and the same can be said for the enemies, which 2 has a lot of, though the China world definitely stands out more for its questionable representation. After the 5 worlds have been made thoroughly serious, Sam clears a snowy hangar to reach an alien city containing Mental's main headquarters, the Mental Institution. But if we're strictly talking about the gameplay, Serious Sam 2 might actually be my favorite in the series. I adore how it shamelessly embraces its more arcadey elements, and I enjoyed my entire playthrough from start to finish. But that's just me, and there are definitely still flaws with the gameplay. One drawback of 2 is that there's a lot less dodging and a lot more mindlessly holding down left click. Some parts of the game can also feel clunky or unintuitive, with the best examples being during the boss fights. Various enemy spawns can be kind of weird sometimes, and a few arenas feel like they go on just a little bit too long, with it being especially noticeable during the very end of the game, then followed by a cool looking but irritating to fight final boss. Fuck off! Which unfortunately leaves kind of a sour taste in your mouth after what I otherwise consider to be a very fun game. I did also experience some broken sequences once or twice. I recommend Serious Sam 2, but only if you're prepared to face its initial whiplash. It's far from perfect, but in my opinion, it's a really good time. Despite being probably the longest in the entire franchise, 2 consistently finds ways to one-up itself, and part of its draw is just seeing what the fuck it'll throw at you next. And with those aforementioned settings, it's a fast, psychotic little game that I would recommend to any fan of boomer shooters, even if they didn't like the other Serious Sam games. Just, again, bear with it. And as a footnote, Sam 2 actually comes bundled with an optional mod, Insanity 2, and yeah, it's pretty insane. It gives you even more control over all the game's stats, allowing you to go really in depth with your preferences, while also breaking some previous limits. It's a fun way to re-experience some of the levels with an even crazier feel. Once again, you have a choice when it comes to versions with this one. There's the standalone Serious Sam 3 and the one included with Serious Sam Fusion, and the singular DLC for this game can be acquired with both. I've played through each of them, and I generally had a better time with the Fusion edition, but admittedly I didn't notice all that much difference between them. Some more obvious changes are slight tweaks to spawns and the ability to reload while running. I did also notice significantly more broken pathfinding this time around, but nothing game-breaking, and considering the sheer size of the waves in this game, it's not really a big deal. And after looking up some of the changes, I also realized that the magazine sizes had been tweaked a bit, making incessant reloading more optional.
Put a sock in it.
Released in 2011, Serious Sam 3 BFE takes place before the events of the first encounter, hence the name Before First Encounter. Presumably because of the backlash to 2's more loony art style, Crow Team decided to go way in the other direction, making everything more realistic. Don't get me wrong, there is a real novelty to seeing Serious Sam in a more gritty aesthetic, and despite this approach, the colors are still decently vibrant, at least until the last third of the game. Gameplay-wise, Sam 3 is much closer to the encounters than Serious Sam 2. One reason for this is that the amount of enemies in the game is dialed back to being mostly just reimaginings of the encounters enemies. Of course, there are a few new additions as well, but I can't really say I enjoyed them. There's some harmless new bullet sponges to shoot at, but there's also these two fuckers. There's these leaping things that clamber around pillars in the environment until they dart out at you before jumping right back behind another pillar. Though the game is a bit merciful with these, as the pillars can often be destroyed using nearby C4 crates, but that's only most of the time. Another annoying new addition is the Witch Brides, who appear briefly in the air and will slow you until you take a chunk out of their large health pool, damaging and briefly immobilizing you if you don't do so in time. Then they warp somewhere else with next to no cue as to where. You then repeat this around 2 to 3 times before you finally kill them. Not counting bosses, Witch Brides are easily my least favorite Serious Sam enemy out of the whole series. They really aren't that fun to fight and tend to bring battles to a screeching halt until you play their cat and mouse game. A few times the level design can also leave something to be desired. Though I enjoyed the majority of them, some stood out to me for enemy spawns that felt a lot more like padding for time. As for the weapons, they're all still pretty fun to shoot. The one exception would be the double-barrel shotgun. Its animations are largely copied from the encounters, and the more gritty aesthetic makes it feel very strange to use. But this is made up for by the new weapons added in 3, which I have no complaints about and I think add a lot to the experience. Moving on to the story, it follows Sam just as he was setting out to use the time travel teleporter thing that sends him to the first encounter. His journey of collecting stuff, powering generators, and shooting aliens then ensues. There are recurring side characters, but if I said I even remembered their names before making this video, I'd be lying. They really do just show up, throw a few one-liners out, and then die. And similar to 2, the dialogue has that Serious Sam brand of lame to it, but it did still have me smiling.
Professor, you've got to get us that data.
Quinn, it's me. Stein didn't make it.
Shit. Did you find his phone?
You mean the phone you just called?
I realize my takes on 3 have been pretty negative so far, so I do want to reiterate that I like this game. As I said before, the gameplay feels like a more direct and logical progression from the encounters, and save for the more annoying enemies and lackluster final level, there wasn't any bad moments in my playthrough that really hindered my fun. The sense of scale in 3 is also pretty sweet, with one of the earlier boss fights being a massive alien ship flying overhead. And keeping with what is basically tradition at this point, the final boss of Sam 3 is awkward but still a very cool visual spectacle. Despite my issues with some of its gameplay, Sam 3 is easily the most snappy in the series so far, which is saying a lot because the previous entries were good for this as well. And if you still want more after beating the game, it has a fairly priced DLC containing 3 big new levels. The DLC includes returning weapons from the previous games too, and while I'm of course happy to see them return here, I do kinda wish they were just in the base game. But yeah, it's a cool way to get more Serious Sam 3 and... oh shit, the green guys are back. If you like Serious Sam, or you just want a boomer shooter adjacent game to unwind with, then Serious Sam 3 is a good recommendation. Released in 2020, Serious Sam 4 takes place before the events of Before First Encounter. That's right, we're still running backwards. Right as you drop into Serious Sam 4, you'll notice just how many enemies this game can handle at once. The scale of battles in Serious Sam 4 is staggering. For all of this crap to be on your screen with barely any performance hit is nothing short of insanity. But moving on to the story, it follows the Act Sam traveling the world and fighting mental with his annoying party of archetypes. Remember what I said during the Sam 2 and 3 parts of this video? About how their humor still had me smiling? Well, it's hard for me to give the same praise to Serious Sam 4. The dialogue is both not very funny and constant. At points it felt more like I was listening to Borderlands 3. The forgettable side characters from BFE have been practically doubled, and the newer ones are a lot more insufferable. The only characters I can say I actually enjoyed having around were Father Mikhail, an Eastern European priest most likely inspired by Father Grigori, and Charlie, an alien who joins you as an informant. But Charlie only shows up for like 3 minutes, so I don't know if it even counts. The main villain is okay too, but that's only because his voice actor absolutely carries the role.
How lovely to see you again, Sam.
Even the game itself doesn't really seem to give a shit about its side characters either. Spoiler warning, I guess.
Fuck!
Damn it, Kenny. Sorry, I wish... I'm not good at this crap.
But if I'm being very generous, there were still a few moments that made me crack a smile.
Oh! Holy shit! Holy shit!
But now that I'm done bitching about the writing, I'm pleased to say that the gameplay in SAM 4 still slaps. The weapons are easily the best they've ever been in 4, with the double barrel in particular having a much better feel than in any of the other games. Also new in SAM 4 are equipment items, pretty much a replacement for power-ups. All of them are pretty fun to use, with my favorite being the black hole. As is customary for a new SAM entry, there's some additional cannon fodder new to 4 as well, along with these guys who only die to back shots.
Yes, sir. Back shooting commencing.
Nearly all of the enemies from the encounters in 3 make a return here, which unfortunately includes the witch brides. Granted, they're a lot less obnoxious now, though I'm still not a huge fan. A good way to deal with them is getting a headshot with a sniper, but doing this means absolutely tanking your frame rate, as for some reason scoping in sent my PC temperatures into orbit. Skill points are also a thing now, and while all the skills are pretty cool, I think they could have just been awarded to the player as they progress, or in most cases just given to the player right at the start, rather than being locked away behind a skill tree at all. None of this game really screams that it needs a skill tree system, and unless you're specifically searching for more skill points around the map, then you'll most likely not unlock most of these. Which is a shame because again, there's some pretty cool stuff in here. I haven't even been able to try monster riding yet, and that sounds awesome. SAM 4 is also very strange when it comes to graphics. Ignoring some subpar loading of the models and textures, SAM 4 in gameplay can actually look pretty damn good when it wants to. But then you see the cutscenes and the cutscenes were definitely not finished, because if they were, then I guess the pandemic really must have got to Crow Team. Lighting and character models are the main issues with them, and despite looking like rips from mobile games, they still made my PC fans go ballistic while the scenes played out. Optimization is absolutely not Serious Sam 4's strong suit. Even though I have more than the recommended specs, I still experienced occasional frame drops and long-ass loading times. But all of this quickly begins to explain itself once you get further into the game. Once I first reached this one level set in France about halfway through the story, I remember streaming the game to a call and making a Todd Howard joke about how I could go to the hills in the distance, only to realize that I actually could. Yeah, Serious Sam 4 has a map that's the size of a full open world game and then some. The existence of side objectives also makes a lot more sense with this in mind. My theory is that Sam 4 was intended to have more open world functionality, but due to its limited resources and most likely the pandemic too, the idea had to be dialed back a lot, but again, that's just a theory. However, what Crow Team did manage to pull off is pretty sweet. The game ends with, you guessed it, a slightly awkward but awesome looking boss fight. And man, is it easily the coolest awkward boss so far. Testosterone levels really go through the roof with this one. Serious Sam 4 is riddled with issues, to the point that I'd say it's only worth picking up on a sale due to its price tag. It also suffers from a slight identity crisis, but not so much that it strays away from being a Serious Sam game at its core. The huge amounts of enemies are here, the guns are here, the explosions are here, and Sam is here. Top that off with some pretty decent environmental variation, and you've got yourself a decent Sam entry. If you're thirsty for a new shoot 'em up, or you're a big fan of Serious Sam, you could absolutely do worse than this. Though before we move on, I want to tell you all a little story. While I was recording the gameplay for this video, I got curious. The sudden open world map in Serious Sam 4 is insanely huge for what the game is already. But how far could I actually go? Anytime I had previously veered off course from the objectives, the map looked like it just kept going and going. I happened to be on a quad bike when I had this thought, which in Serious Sam 4 lets you scale nearly all terrain. Thus, I set out on my surveying journey. The map kept going for an already shockingly long time, with random enemies and airdrops routinely spawning. Though my objective was exploration, so I did my best to just ignore them and dodge them. I eventually ran into my first major obstacle, a large river channel that looked like it might loop around the entire map, effectively becoming its border. But I wasn't giving up just yet, so I followed it. To my surprise, I eventually came across a block in the channel, allowing me to drive across and continue my journey. Eventually, I ended up progressing so far that the lighting began to break, and these flying puke shooting guys spawned, and unlike previous enemies, they seemed to be an actual preventative measure against exploration. But I ignored these drawbacks and pressed onward. I made it through multiple forests, dodging the trees that actually had collision with the flying vomit balls on my tail. I was in awe as I managed to make it all the way to the snowy mountains that were once mere set dressing off in the far distance. At this point, my PC fans were begging for me to stop, making sounds as if I had not one but two Chrome tabs open, but I had to know what was out there, so I kept going. After stumbling upon a brand new mountain range, I started to suspect that this map might actually be a full-scale depiction of France, but my deliberation would have to wait as I finally encountered terrain that the quad bike could not scale. I began to tumble down the mountain, and the flying puke balls finally hit their mark. But I had an ace in the hole, a defibrillator that I had happened to pick up earlier in the level. I used it to revive myself and the flying balls of puke were despawned, though the quad bike had exploded, so I was now moving on foot. A significant disadvantage, but I wouldn't let that deter me. I made it to another mountain and scaled it as best I could, but I finally succumbed to the random enemy spawns and gravity, forcing me to return to the actual game. Later on, I decided to look up some more information about SAM 4's France map. For a quick comparison, Grand Theft Auto 5's map is around 125 square kilometers in size. Not bad. Not bad. SAM 4's France map is somewhere around 17,000 square kilometers. Why is this in serious fucking Sam? Why is this map still full size and in the final game when it's barely being used? I could make the argument that Crow Team maybe just generated an open world map as the foundation for some of the game's bigger fights, but 17,000 kilometers? How big were Crow Team planning to make this? Is SAM 5 gonna have us fighting with planets? No fucking wonder 4 runs like shit. It has this thing loaded in the background. Anyway, Siberian Mayhem. Released in 2022, Serious Sam Siberian Mayhem is a glorified DLC for Serious Sam 4, but it's a good glorified DLC. Performance-wise, Siberian Mayhem runs about the same as Serious Sam 4, if not worse at times, which is very confusing because there's no longer a dormant map the size of 23 fully scaled Singapores. It's not a deal breaker for the gameplay and I definitely still had a lot of fun, but I should be able to run this as intended. Siberian Mayhem consists of 5 really long levels, which isn't too bad considering it's a fraction of Serious Sam 4's price. Chronologically, these levels happen just before the final fight in Sam 4, and also in a parallel dimension or something. New enemies, new weapons, new side characters, the whole shebang you'd expect. The new side characters are also a lot more unobtrusive compared to the ones in 4, which I appreciate. On top of that, the more open sections of levels have a lot more structure to them, so if you explore, you might actually find something. If you can stand a few FPS drops and want to shoot stuff, then grab this one. And if you enjoyed Serious Sam 4, then you should absolutely grab this one. And that's pretty much the entire series. There's some bizarre spin-offs and console exclusives that I've not really talked about here, but that's a story for another day. Most entries in the series also have Steam Workshop support, so if you like mods, then there's a lot to choose from. I've not delved too deep into any of it myself, but from the little that I have seen, the custom-built Sirius engine that the games are made on seems to lend itself pretty well to modding. And if you have friends, most of the games have co-op and versus modes available. During sales, the entire series still bundles for pretty cheap, so if you're unsure, that'll be the time to give this a try. Despite some issues, Crow Team definitely knows what people like about Serious Sam's gameplay, and consistently puts out the fun run and gun. It's not gonna change your life or anything, but it definitely has its moments. And those moments kick ass. Oh shit. Can I put that at the end of the video?
Really?
Sure, I need an outro clip.